afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of MSME Masterclass. Today's session is on scaling MSMEs, MSME IPO, and governance, and we have Divya Momaya with us. With over 22 years of experience in legal compliance and corporate governance, Divya is a renowned governance expert and entrepreneur who has mentored businesses towards scalability, compliance, and board leadership. She is the founder of Mentor My Board, an initiative dedicated to training and grooming promoter directors, independent directors, and startup leaders. Additionally, she is the founder of DSMCO, a company she has led since 2007, offering specialized expertise in corporate and secretarial laws, IPO advisory, and business compliance. Divya is a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India and holds a Bachelor's of Commerce degree. Has distinguished career spans leadership roles, including as an independent director for Motilal Oswal Financial Services Limited, GTPL Hathway Limited, and Bluejet Healthcare Limited. Her contributions to the corporate sector have earned her prestigious recognition, such as being featured in Entrepreneurs Today 40 Under 40 2024 and Your Stories 100 Emerging Women Leaders, Her Story 2024. As a sought-after speaker, Divya specializes in SME IPOs, governance, compliance, and board leadership, offering deep insights into how MSMEs can leverage IPOs for business expansion while ensuring strong governance structures. She will share her expert insights, making the session highly relevant and accessible for business owners and leaders navigating the complexities of IPO and governance in India. Welcome to our MSME Masterclass, Divya. We're pleased to have you today with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I will quickly jump on to our first question, which is, what are the key advantages of listing on the MSME IPO platform for small and medium-sized businesses?
So basically, small and medium enterprises are, the backbone of India. They are the foundation, and I think, a wonderful even contributors to employment generation and the GDP overall. Now, the biggest challenge what the SMEs face is raising of funds, the capacity to raise funds. So, in 2012, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, which governs the capital markets, along with Bombay Stock Exchange and National Stock Exchange, they came out with the platform called SME, IPO platform. Now, with this platform, the small and medium businesses are able to raise funds through capital markets by going and getting their companies listed. Now, what are the key advantages are the first and foremost, as I mentioned, access to capital. Usually when, the businesses go to the banks, they will ask for the collaterals, they will ask for, the properties to be mortgaged. But every business has a limitation to give the mortgages and the collaterals. And that's where the promoters find it very difficult to go and raise additional capital every time they have expansion, every time they have, the challenges in the business cycle. And this access to capital is very, very open when they go and get the public, money. Definitely it comes with a lot of responsibility, accountability. We'll speak about it, during our entire course. Now, again, another point is increasing visibility. Now, when we talk of increasing the visibility, it means today, probably your business, you're doing it for 20 years, 30 years, nobody knows about you, except your current vendors or, your suppliers or your current employees. But the moment you're listed on the stock exchanges, the entire India, or I say entire world, comes to know that you are a listed entity. So that kind of creates an enhanced visibility, and which sets you apart from your competitors, which sets you apart from, in the entire ecosystem where you're working or where you're operating your business from. Again, valuation is something, which is very, very important aspect, when the businesses go for getting listed. So today, for example, you are unlisted. You're a private limited company, and you cannot go to the bank and mortgage your shares. They will say, we can't, this is not a liquid commodity. But the moment you're listed on the stock exchanges, the liquidity becomes very good. I mean, you can go and pledge your shares. The promoters can go and pledge the shares and raise additional capital in case the businesses needs that. And again, having a larger base of shareholders, with the wider connection, whether, you are retaining good quality employees through giving a lot of benefits to the employees through sort of stock option schemes, right? Which usually are not very, very openly accepted when you are a private limited or in the space where you only have limited, kind of exposure to the markets. So these are some basic important benefits which, the businesses get. Definitely there are multiple benefits, especially when you get listed. The biggest thing is the visibility, what you get created, and the retention of your clients, your employees, and your vendors also. So I think these are some important benefits.
Got it. Now, can you also help us understand how can a business access if it is ready to go public through a SME IPO?
The best thing is, is the business ready for expansion? I think that's the first question every entrepreneur should ask. Once they feel that yes, expansion is there, definitely there are certain criteria, which needs to be fulfilled before you go to the, go and get your company listed. And there is a very, very stringent due diligence process which happens before the IPOs, the companies come out with the IPOs. Now, when we talk of the eligibility criteria, or when they know that when am I ready, the first and foremost thing is, the net tangible assets of the business should have 1.5 crore and above. I'm talking about Indian rupees, 1.5 crore. The profitability track record should be there. At least out of 2 out of 3 financial years, the business should be profitable business. Net worth of the company should be minimum 1 crore. And a minimum operational history of at least 3 years should be there. Now here when we talk of operational history, a lot of times businesses are in proprietorship or partnership and they go and get converted to a private limited company. So what 3 years track record means? The track record of the promoter. So even if they are into a proprietorship or a partnership, that track record will be counted while counting this 3 years period. So a lot of businesses, they just convert themselves to a private limited and a public limited company, maybe 1 year or 3 months or 6 months before, they start preparing for the IPO. I think 3 months is a short period, but at least 1 year prior, because the 1 year is the complete journey, which is, required by a promoter to go through before they come out with the IPO. Again, post-issue capital cannot exceed 25 crore. So these are certain criteria, and if any of the viewers want, we can also share a IPO assessment tool, which they can use to understand where do they stand on the, kind of the journey of the IPO readiness. So, yeah.
Now, could you also help our attendees understand what are the common misconceptions about SME IPOs that must be addressed?
When we talk of the misconceptions, people feel, SME IPO will be, you in 1 or 2 months or 3 months, you're ready and go to a merchant banker, identify a merchant banker if you are qualifying those criteria and you go and get listed. But it's not like that. Going through a IPO process, IPO readiness process is like going through, the fire. I always give the example of gold. When you put the gold in fire and when it comes out, it becomes, the purest form of gold. So exactly is the process of people or companies going from, through the process of IPO. It cleans up, a lot of non-compliances. It cleans up, impurities of the businesses. I mean, for example, usually when proprietorship or partnership, we tend to have we and our business as the same entity, because in proprietorship, a lot of times PAN number is also same, right? But the moment you are a private limited company and then a public limited company, you are separate and your business is separate, right? So how you're transacting with the business, I mean, how the business or the profits which are generated, how you're withdrawing those profits, right? How are you using those, the money which you're taking out? All these things become very, very important. And usually, even after people start their private limited company, they still run them as proprietors. But the biggest, difference when the companies go for IPO is that lot of accountability and transparency comes in, because the public money is being taken. And when the public money comes in, accountability, responsibility, and transparency goes very high. So people, the misconceptions, if I basically speak about, is that just go to market, raise money, and then you don't have to, respond to anyone, or you're not answerable to anyone. So that's the biggest misconception. Usually what happens is when you go to a bank will, lend you money, and every month they will be, you'll be supposed to pay EMI. But when you go and take money from public, you're not repaying the money back. That money you have taken as a capital is with you forever. They are going to be, the capital is locked in the business, and that will remain in the business forever. If you need additional funds, you can go and, raise further public issue, and you can raise additional capital. That capital also can be in the business forever. But definitely that comes with a lot of, transparency and accountability. So I think that's the biggest misconception usually people have.
Got it. And how does an IPO improve access to finance and credit for growing businesses?
Come again with the question.
How does a IPO improve access to finance and credit for growing business?
Okay. So definitely, as I said, instead of going to a bank when the companies are raising funds through IPO, the biggest thing is that, this money, what you get is for a longer period. Based on your business performance, you are able to go and get raise the money from public. That's, the biggest thing. Again, there are various ways you can raise funds, through going to public. Number one is definitely initial public offering, which is the first time you're hitting the markets, you raise money. Then you can also raise money from, the employees of your company through ESOP, Employee Stock Option Scheme. Definitely that may be very, very negligible, but that's also one way, where you get buy-in of those employees to work with you for a long-term basis. Along with that, if the funds are required additionally, the promoters can pledge the shares, with the banks, take additional money on that. Definitely that goes in, there will be definitely a lot of complications around it. By repaying the money, you'll have to generate business. So those are there. But that source of raising funds, is open in case of difficulty. And again, once you start performing, once your business starts performing well with the money which you have taken, the additional money which can come in is by way of private equity investors, by way of institutional investors who are ready to give you more and more funds based on your track record, based on your performance, right? Which usually would not have been possible if you are unlisted. Only banks will give you money. But here institutional investors starts coming in, PE starts coming in. Today mutual funds also, invest in the businesses. So mutual funds, will take the stake in the company. So that will give a lot of credibility to the business to further raise capital in these stock markets by way of, FPO or preferential issue, how we call it, at whatever stage of expansion they are. So I think this gives them a very, very big, impetus to take their business on a very, growth pace.
Okay. Yeah. Divya, while you've discussed a couple of criteria that the businesses must meet, I would want you to share further insights on the exact eligibility criteria that the business has to meet to qualify for a SME IPO in India.
Yeah. I think broadly what I spoke, the initial criterias definitely are there. But there are certain other, important criterias also. The track record of promoters is very, very important, right? The promoters should not be disqualified from being a director. The promoters, should not have, the legal issues which are of criminal nature against them. Their track record, matters a lot. It should not be a non-performing asset under, any of the financial institutions. It should not be under BIFR or NCLT, where the insolvency has begun against the company. So those are, also the criterias which are very, very important. Again, here, you should not have any major creditor who has gone and, filed cases against the promoters. So there are, definitely a lot of additional criteria also there. I mean, for example, the company must compulsorily should have a website, when they are going for IPO. The criteria is again definitely it should be a public limited company. So private limited companies will have to convert themselves to a public limited company. The knowledge and awareness of the promoter also becomes very, very important, right? And I think these are the basic, hygienes and structures. And again, the corporate governance is something very, very important when, they are going and accessing the markets. They should have their boards which are 50% independent boards. That means 50% of the board of directors of the company will have to be independent directors. When we talk of independent directors, they cannot be related to the promoter. They should not have any pecuniary relationship with the company, right? And also the committees, audit committee, nomination committee, remuneration committee will have to be formed. So these all are prerequisites before you file the DRHP, that is draft red herring prospectus, with the stock exchanges. So in India today, there are two major stock exchanges on which the companies can get listed. One is the Bombay Stock Exchange and another is National Stock Exchange. So the companies will have to approach through a merchant banker. Merchant bankers will be appointed. There will be a lot of ecosystem players in that entire process who would be helping the business to, ring the bell on the stock markets on the day they get listed. Yeah.
Right. Now, Divya, can you tell our attendees what are the key compliance and documentation requirements for listing in India?
So when we talk of compliance and document requirement, I think this is the most strongest and the most important pillar in the entire IPO journey process. When we talk of the documentation starting from the company formation will be evaluated, will be vetted by the legal counsel, legal consultants whom, the merchant bankers will be appointing to evaluate that every transaction, every rupee which the company has transacted, since, their beginning, that will have to be, evaluated. Related party transactions will have to be evaluated. Any money which has, been lying in the company, whether they are, the money which has come from related party or as loans, every documentation supporting that, transaction will need to be produced to the legal, team. If there are intellectual property rights, the registration processes of that, the documentation, the certificates will have to be produced. If company is registered, say for example, if it's a food industry company and if it is registered with the FSSAI, so all the licenses of FSSAI have to be valid and active. It cannot be that, okay, some license was, some license expired 1 month back or 1 year back and nobody has renewed that. The payment of dues to the Provident Fund, ESIC, all dues are clear. Income tax, GST, there are no liabilities, no litigation, on that. And if there are any litigations going on where company has gone and filed appeal against, those orders, all these things will come under the risk factors, while, the DRHP is drafted by the legal team, giving a very clear indication to the investors that the company is good, company's performance is good, but certain legal liabilities can come up if, these matters which are pending before the courts go against, not in favor of the company. So the risk factors are definitely well given to the stakeholders to make decision whether to invest in the company considering those risks or not. Therefore, those legal documentation is the foundation of the entire IPO process. Now, in lot of cases, it is said that all outstanding liabilities also, maybe, asked to clear it off. The due diligence report, whether, the financial due diligence, the secretarial due diligence, the legal due diligence will be conducted by different parties. Reinstatement of accounts will be done when the companies are, the auditors are appointed. because new auditors, it may be possible that, the auditors who are currently auditing the company are not peer-reviewed auditors. So company will have to appoint another auditor who is peer-reviewed auditor, right? And then there will be a lot of restatement of, accounts which may happen considering the revised policies, the accounting standards of the, which are getting applicable to the company pursuant to the, restructuring of the business. Now, this also is very, very important, where the policies of the company, how are the policies defined? So, for example, HR policy, whether company has HR policy or not, whether company has, sexual harassment policy or not, whether company has, documentation policy, the preservance. Today, a lot of IT threats are there. So does the company has IT security policy, data privacy policy? So all these structures will have to be seen, all these documentation will have to be seen. Now, if the expenses are being done by the company, each and every expense has to be backed by a voucher, right? So the documentation, I think, consumes maximum time in this entire IPO process.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, there's an important question that we have from one of our attendees. How much time and cost should a business anticipate when preparing for a SME IPO?
See, broadly, the cost of the IPO will definitely be depending on case-to-case basis. It will also depend on the size of the company. It will also depend on, what time of the market the IPOs are coming. It will also depend on, how clean is the company, the documentation, how much time it's going to take, for the consultants to make all the compliances good. For example, we recently handled one matter where certain return of allotments were not filed by the company for some capital which was raised almost 10 years back. Certain documents were not filed with RBI for almost, around 10 to 15 years, transaction which was happened prior that time. Now, today, if the company has to go for IPO, they will have to go get those offenses compounded. They will have to make that good, right? And for that, there will be additional cost to it. But if I talk of the entire overall cost, it ranges between 8% to 15% of the total issue size. So, for example, if the company is coming out with 100 crore of, fundraise, then close to around 10 crore to 15 crore will be the, range of expenses they may have to. And here again, a lot of ecosystem players get involved. The consultants will be there, merchant bankers will be there, legal team will be there, share transfer agents will come into picture, stock exchanges will come into picture, registrar of companies will come into picture, right? The depository bodies will come into picture, NSDL or CDSL, how the connectivity goes. Registered valuers will be coming into picture. The company will have to appoint a full-time company secretary, a full-time CFO, right, for the company, because the company secretary will be the compliance officer for the company. So a lot of times unlisted companies don't need a full-time CS. So, they usually outsource their, annual retainers, compliance to a consultant. But the moment you are going for IPO, you're preparing your DRHP, you will have to appoint your onboard, your, team members in your team, basically, right?
Right. Divya, the second leg of the question was, how much time does this generally take, according to you?
Again, it becomes very, kind of case-to-case subjective. If the company is very clean, if the company is compliant since, it's long time, the IPO journey is short. Say even 6 months, IPO can come up. It just takes around 2-3 months, 4 months time. And then stock exchanges will take around 90 days to 120 days to give their approvals. So 6 to 7 months, can be a very reasonable time. But if the company is very old, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, the documentation of those 20 years, because as I said, the entire due diligence happens from the day one of the company. Even if the company is 25 years old, you will have to procure all the documents. And if the documents are not available, there will be certain declarations, affidavits, certain proof that why those documents are not available will have to be created. If the properties are there. In fact, this is, a matter where I've seen a lot of matters, a lot of companies struggle, is that, some properties were taken, very, long back, and there is no track record available of the original documentation of the property. The companies will have to go to the registrar, sub-registrar's office, take the documents, create certain, fresh applications. So all these things, may take longer time. If the company doesn't have intellectual property rights, the company has a good brand value, but they're not protected, they will have to go to, the trademark authorities to get the trademark registration done. So if the companies have not paid the dues, for the Provident Fund or, ESIC, the companies will have to go and deposit that amount, get those offenses compounded. And all these things, a lot of times takes huge, gap for them to comply. And I was talking to one of the promoter, and he said, at one point I felt I should quit this process, right? It was so tedious process. But as I said, the benefits of listing, is are far, more when you look at the entire process. And this entire journey is like going through a process of fire.
And next question to you, Divya, is what are the major regulatory challenges companies face while going public?
I think few of them I covered. Major regulatory challenges definitely are, meeting the compliance expectations from all the regulators. So I don't only speak about SEBI, which is Securities and Exchange Board of India, or stock exchanges, but also, the registrar of companies, the sectoral, regulators like RBI or SEBI or, FSSAI or, any authority. Maybe if the company is in the insurance industry, IRDA, right? So any regulator you are bounded by, you'll have to make sure that each and every compliance is up to date. And there is absolutely no excuse, because the moment you, say that, oh, this document is not available, either that will impact the valuation of a company, or that will impact, the fundraising capacity for the promoters. Because that's where the investors may see a red flag in the, the company's performance, and they may reduce their exposure in the business, right? So it's very important that compliance has absolutely no excuse, and that creates a major regulatory, challenges in the entire process. Now, again, definitely one is the due diligence is stringent, but again, post IPO also it's an ongoing reporting of the quarterly, annual, half-yearly transactions, reporting to the stock exchanges. So all these things, keep coming. And that is where, I think the businesses have to have this strong consultant, strong team, who is with them to manage any regulatory hurdles which come up. And it's again, an entire ecosystem. One person can't handle everything. You will need the entire ecosystem to work for you there.
Right. Divya, now moving on, how should a company prepare its financials to attract investors for an IPO?
Financials, I think broadly, it's the net asset value method, on which the IPO is, tracked. It's in terms of multiples of PE, price to earning ratio. Now, the PE ratio multiplied by the net profit, that's profit after tax, will give you the size of the company, with which the company, is valued, right? And for that, definitely you'll have to, the best hygiene for the promoters is to see the company has healthy net profit. Right? That's the biggest, kind of a parameter. Now, when I see healthy net profit, a lot of times it happens that, okay, when the companies are planning to go for IPO, suddenly in 1 or 2 quarters, the profits surge. Suddenly there was no profit, and because now the promoter wants to go for IPO, they will, increase the net profits. But again, after some time, the profit starts going down. So what I'm saying is the company should have a consistent, sustained kind of a track record is very, very important. And if the company has sustained track record or the financial performance, that becomes the foundation for preparing the financial statements. Now, another point, very important here comes is how the businesses are utilizing their debt, right? Now, a lot of times, the businesses take money, and there are certain defaults happening. So the biggest thing when the promoters have an intention of going for IPO, maybe not today, maybe 1 year or 2 years down the line, start from today that you're not defaulting on any of the loans or repayments of that. That will show and that will strengthen your balance sheet. So that's the one of the parameter which investors look at, that how has been your track record, how has been your performance while serving the debt. So this is something very, very important. So IPO is not a process, you're just going to the market and raising funds, because they're all the sources of other funds are stopped. The best time to go and get the IPO funds are when you don't need money, right? You already have ample money in your business, you're getting it. But now with the expansion, maybe you want to acquire some additional unit, you want to buy out, some existing facility, you want to do a forward or a backward integration. That is the time you go and raise money for that expansion plans, not for your working capital. And, again, very important point here is when the businesses raise funds through IPO, it's not that you take money and then you forget. The regulators are monitoring the utilization of fund, each and every penny which you are utilizing from the funds you have taken from public has to be accounted, has to be shown, has to be reported to the stock exchanges on the quarterly and the half-yearly basis, right? And say, for example, if you say that, okay, I'm going to use, say, around 20% of the money what I'm going to raise from public in, say, working capital. Now, tomorrow you say that, and the rest all is going to capex. So tomorrow you may say that, I want to use 30% in working capital and I want to use in, maybe only 70% in capex. So that will not be allowed. You will have to identify what's going to be your need well in advance, and you can use. So, for example, if you utilize your full complete 20% of your funds, what you have raised from public for working capital, additional source of working capital you'll have to generate from the business, or the promoters will have to pump in additional money. But the regulators are very, very stringent on utilization of the funds, right? So all these things come very importantly when you are preparing your financial statements to attract investors. And the more transparently you prepare your financial statements, the more you take investors in confidence, that will give you a kind of a leverage.
Got it. My next question to you, Divya, is what valuation methods are typically used for small and mid-sized businesses during an IPO?
I think the best thing which I spoke about is the earning multiples. That's how the IPO valuation is derived. And it's again not, the only related to you, but it's again the industry benchmarking what the merchant bankers do. So they will see, who are your listed competitors, in the market, and what is their price to earning ratio going on, right? And today, you may Google, every listed company, you will be able to see what P multiples the company demands, based on the price, what the market is going on in the market. So the basis is, the industry benchmark, which gets created through the PE ratio. Another is the future cash flow projections also. It's a very combination kind of a method which, the registered valuer follows. And majorly this is the asset-based valuation, especially if the businesses are asset-heavy. The valuation method will be more of the asset-based valuation. And regulators have full right to ask the justification of the valuation method, what they have followed. There will be definitely a lot of assumptions which a registered valuer will be making. So that's, kind of the valuation process goes through. Again, it is also, the listed peers, as I mentioned, if they have a listed competitors, listed peers, in the industry. So what are the P's they command? And then, the risk factors associated in the business or the track record of the promoter. So that also gets, a lot of times discounted from the valuation what you demand. So I think in the entire IPO process, this also the valuation at which the companies will be coming out with the IPO, whether it is the fixed price issue or the book building issue, that's the defining criteria. And the regulators definitely, after few fiascos we have seen, where the valuation which came out at the time of IPO was very high, and today the stocks are trading at least 1/4 of the price at which they came out for the during the IPO. So regulators have become very, very vigilant on this part. And I always quote this case study of DMart, where definitely the valuation could have been much more when they came out with IPO. But the promoters said that let the market get the rewards of lower valuation, and they came out at a little lower valuation, and today it's trading almost, I think, 4x of the price at which they came out with the IPO. So yeah.
Divya, according to you, what are the best practices to improve financial governance before going public?
When we talk of the financial governance or overall corporate governance, because corporate governance is my domain, my expertise, so I can definitely speak on that. The best practices what the company should follow is having a very transparent accounting practices. That's something very, very important, because as I said, till the business is a private limited company or till the business is a proprietorship, you and your business are same, so every money you earn is yours. But the moment, you have more and more stakeholders coming in, whether those stakeholders, even if unlisted, those stakeholders are government by way of taxes, the banks, if you have taken money from banks, the employees, if you have large employee base, so they all become stakeholders in the business. The creditors of the company, they are the stakeholders in the business. So the more and more transparency you keep, the more and more ethical practices, ethical governance comes in, is the foundation for companies and businesses to demand very good valuation when they're going for IPO. Number 2 is internal audits. A lot of times I've seen smaller businesses don't invest in internal audits. They usually go to a chartered accountant or the consultants, tax consultants, once a year maybe, just to file their returns. So they will not be doing the quarterly or half yearly review. It's not that you have to get the accounts audited every quarter. You just need certain oversee of the transactions which have happened on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis or at least half yearly basis, so that if there is any corrective action needs to be taken, that is taken in time, and you're not something window dressing after maybe 1 year, and then you don't have a justification to some transactions which you might have done. And a lot of times auditors also have to qualify the accounts in such matter. So the best thing is having a very, very clear internal audits at a very, very regular intervals. That's number 1. Adopting accounting standards, accounting policies. So having a right people, right consultants becomes very, very important when you're preparing your financial statements. Again, formalizing the policies at the employee level, especially the businesses which are thinking of IPO, surely have grown to a level, maybe 50 crore or 30 crore or 100 crore of turnover, where they've seen the lot of basic ups and downs of the startup phase is gone. You're already in a little bit of matured phase, where you will have to now start looking at creating the policies, the risk management. You'll have to create the corporate governance framework. You'll have to, maybe create the advisory board around you, so that, you are used to report to someone, because as a promoter, as a founder of a private limited or a proprietorship, I am the boss, I am the owner. I don't need to report to anyone. But the moment you are listed, you have a board which has independent directors, external professionals sitting on the board. You're going and reporting it to the stock exchanges. Every information which, for example, if the company is bagging a big contract and it goes into the media in a newspaper, but you have not intimated it to the stock exchange before going it to the media, there is a violation of price sensitive information, right? So all these things I'm usually not aware, so I don't need to report to anyone. I don't need, so it's very important that you create your advisory board well before maybe 1 year or 2 years or 3 years of your planning. So those people will also guide you, navigate you with that journey of IPO, right? And then strengthening leadership, because a lot of times I've seen is promoters usually feel that, oh, I'm the boss of my business and I am the only one who can do everything. A lot of times I've seen promoters say कि मुझे ही पता है मेरे business में क्या होता है. I don't know, I cannot delegate it to anyone, और ये काम तो मेरे अलावा कोई नहीं कर सकता. But the moment you are listed, you can't say that I'm the only one. You'll have to create a strong leadership below you. You'll have to create CXOs, you'll have to create CFO, you'll have to create maybe CTO, CMO, CEO. So all those 1 level below, 2 level below, the leadership will have to be, created. So that's a very, very important thing, when the businesses think of creating that financial discipline in the business.
Right. Now, Divya, how can businesses avoid overpricing and underpricing their IPOs?
I think the most foremost thing here is having a right consultant, who can guide you right. And, because I have been speaking to stock exchanges, and, a lot of times I come to hear that there is a lot of mis-selling, misguidance happening in the markets, right? So identifying right experts who are valuation advisors, valuation consultants, or I say valuation professionals, engage them right, engage right merchant bankers. That's the foremost thing. And then another thing is market research. Don't just go and, take one consultant, somebody told you, and, you go and take that. Go and speak to 10 people. You may get different opinion, different, feedbacks. After taking all the feedbacks, then do your analysis, and then you identify a right, consultant who's going to help you define that right pricing for your shares in the market. And not only that, once you have identified a base price, go and meet certain investors. Ask them, at this price, would you mind investing in us? If 10 people say, no, this is very overpriced, you will have a, benchmark that, no, this price is not acceptable. Then you may have to go back and rework, recalculate, see where are you going wrong. Because, a lot of times we presume a lot of things. The best way is to go to the market, understand what people are expecting from you. People are perceiving your business to be. I think that's the best way to decide, or the tip to avoid the underpricing or overpricing of the IPOs.
Got it. Now, Divya, how can a business maintain compliance and avoid regulatory penalties post-listing?
See, compliance is definitely, if I talk about the benefits of compliance, this is something, which builds a strong investor confidence. The strong governance leads to higher market trust. That's kind of a proven, a strategy or a proven fact that better valuation, the better governance gives you better valuation, number one. Regulatory compliance is something, which is absolutely non-negotiable. And I have seen, today I was doing a research. So I saw few companies are suspended by regulators for, non-compliances. So getting listed, as I said, is a big process. And just imagine, for some of the non-compliances, regulators suspend your trading. The investors who have invested in your company are not able to trade in your shares. You yourself are not able to trade in your shares, and if you want to tomorrow sell off some of the shares and raise money, you are not able to do it because your company is not trading on the stock markets, right? So absolutely compliance is non-negotiable, and good corporate governance definitely helps get good trust of the investors. Now that's in two ways: getting new investors coming on board by way of additional capital, or continuing the existing shareholders for a long term. Who remain invested in you for a long term, and you're giving them good returns, right? In the form of dividend, in the form of buyback, in the form of bonus issues. So those are the ways you reward to the shareholders.
Got it. Now, talking about post-listing, how can a company attract and retain institutional and retail investors post-listing?
I think I covered some points, in my previous thing, but definitely institutional investors or people, that something will be very important is how they perceive you, how transparently you are giving good news as well as bad news to the market, right? If some fire breaks out in a factory and which is beyond your control, is the intimation going in time, or promoters are hiding something and somebody else comes to know, and then complaint goes to regulators and then regulators come and ask you, aisa kuch hua kya, right? So if the promoters are more transparent, more open, more accountable, the markets definitely will give them a better confidence. So I think that's something which is very, very important. And again, encouraging the data-driven, transparent management practices. How your employees are going and speaking about you, right? That's also very important. So all these signals, in the market which go, because now you are in a public domain. Everybody, anybody can get any information about you, and a lot of times, may go and screw some factual information also. So if you are true to, what you have disclosed, you don't have to worry about anything else.
Right. Now, Divya, moving on, what are the common reasons why SME IPOs fail or underperform in the market?
Yeah, I think biggest reason what I have, experienced is non-adhering to the promises you have made to the investors, to the regulators, before you made the DRHP, while you made the, the financial projections, and then the performance is not met. I think, that's the biggest kind of reason for IPOs to underperform, number one. Number two, not taking the compliance seriously. And if the company continuously keeps, hitting the penalties or non-compliances are happening, definitely markets do watch, right? And that also drags down the valuation and the pricing for the companies. Another very important thing is, the focus of the promoter. And I've seen a lot of times promoters lose their focus, and they start monitoring the share price rather than monitoring the financials of the company, right? So they lose track of the business, they lose track of, and the gains on the stock market attract them more. So I think those are the few kind of red flags for people to see lower valuations post listing.
Right. Now, Divya, this is a question that I have. What role do media and public perceptions play in an IPO success?
I think, definitely when the companies are going and getting attracted, definitely when they're going and getting listed on the exchanges, the biggest thing what they do is they do road shows before the IPO, right? And when they're doing road shows, it's called investor relation and public relation. So IR, PR becomes very important. How are you seen in the media? How are you seen? People are talking about you. What are the market sentiments about your product? Say for example, if the product is impacting a sustainable way to the sustainable goals of the world, then definitely market sentiments are high, and that will build up a good perception about the company. But if the companies are in certain products which are damaging the earth, definitely, even if you're coming for IPO, few investors may come and invest, but how the market sentiments are going to be, right? So that's something very important. Reputation management becomes, very important aspect, not only pre-IPO, but post-IPO as well, especially for the promoters. Every word you speak in public, every word, you speak in media, has to be, well filtered, thought of, right? And again, lot of times what happens is when you give the the projections to the banks, right? A lot of times the banks ask for CMA data for 5 years, and if you have given some data to a bank which is not in line with your annual business plan which you have submitted to the stock exchange, that can create problems, right? So in short, crisis management is very, very important. Communication becomes very important. So you will have to appoint a communication strategist for your business, right? Who can, the spokesperson, how we say, yeah? So that person will be very, very important, person for a company to create that perception about the company. And as I said, crisis management, if there's some bad news, give it with grace, right? It's a business, ups and downs can happen. But if, a lot of things are hidden, markets later on, if they come, regulators come to know. Today we are living in a world where I think, no information can be hidden for a long time. The social medias are tracking, the medias, have gone digital. The AI and artificial intelligence, is going, and I think with the regulators becoming smarter, we definitely need to be very, very vigilant what we are speaking.
Now, Divya, how can businesses leverage an IPO to fuel long-term growth and expansion?
I think the best thing, when we talk of leveraging, is that how you're going to use the funds what you have raised from the public. How are you utilizing only for the purposes for which you have raised, right? Expansion plans, how when you're giving the plans to the investors or regulators, that will define how sustained listed entity you will be able to be and seen. I think the long-term growth over the short-term gains is something which always promoters should choose. Especially when you are raising capital, use it for mergers and acquisitions, use it for right talent acquisition, use it for brand enhancement, and use it for the expansion plans, especially research and development or new markets, exploring new markets, creating some new product line. So I think this is where if the IPO funds are utilized, it will give a long-term growth to the businesses.
We've reached the end of today's episode, Divya. Thank you so much for your time with us. We've had a lovely, insightful discussion on IPO and governance, and I'm sure our attendees will gain a lot of insights through your intel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here.
For our audience who are online, if you have any questions from this session, please feel free to type them in the questions section on your Zoom meeting. This recording, along with all the previously conducted masterclass episodes, are on our YouTube channel, which is JSW1 MSME. So you can go there and watch the episodes. Thank you once again, Divya. Bye-bye.
Thank you.